What I'm showing here is some early work that I did in graduate school as part of my thesis, which initially was titled Introspective Landscape. The work during this period was essentially landscape work, but with an idea of trying to emphasize not only the landscape element, but the visual element as well. And so I became more and more engrossed in kind of the graphic look of items, as well as the content of the actual image and what it was of initially. So kind of the combined notion of starting with landscape, but actually looking at the light forms, the spatial ideas that differentiated it from more of the traditional landscape interests that people have had in the past. During the time in graduate school at the Institute of Design, I also started where the previous work in landscape had been oftentimes utilizing a view camera. I obtained a 35mm camera and became quite interested in the actual environment and became in Chicago, the people, the events, and actually I have to say that this became more and more important to me. A lot of street photography, but again with the notion of not only what the situation might have been, but also what would be considered more of an interest in the way images looked, the complexity of an image, and it actually became increasingly important in the way I was thinking about the work. Probably also because there was increasingly more and more, I would say, interest in the politics of the time and what was going on during this period. It was the Vietnam War was beginning to get pretty hot and heavy, and so the environment around this time and what was occurring and kind of the lifestyle of people during that time became of great interest to me. And so a lot of the work that I ended up doing was street photography, although I never actually included that as part of the landscape project, the thesis project. It was a completely different area, but something that really to me became more important. But I guess I was way too far involved in the introspective landscape project. And although that project actually consisted of both conventional black and white photographs and color slides and a film, so it was, in a sense, the first multimedia piece. This interest in in street photography also extended to the time in Philadelphia. This is a particular image that was done in Philadelphia. And street photography became something in addition to what had been that notion of landscape and the documentary notion. This image actually was taken in Chicago, but not during my graduate work, but during the 1968 Democratic Convention, when the tensions, the political tensions and sociological tensions of the time were extreme. And I was photographing to not so much to be a part of the demonstration, but to rather observe it. And I was able to photograph a lot without necessarily becoming involved in the actual demonstration of the time. I guess looking at it more as though one were an observer, which I think photography in very large measure is a part of, is certainly the documentary aspect. This image continued later on, again with my interest in documentary work, and coupled with what was going on, the zeitgeist of the time, very political. I went to Washington, D.C. on an anti-war march and took a lot of pictures there. This one happens to be actually back in Philadelphia. Again, a street photography, but with that political spin to it. Again, another demonstration. And I guess I utilized the access to people in demonstrations and their particular emotions and expressions, so that it was in part about the demonstration, but it was also in part about just the visualization of people at the time. This image, which was actually in that Mina White chose to be part of the Light 7 show, was actually shot in I believe Chicago, but then I much later, when I was in Philadelphia, teaching at the Philadelphia College of Art at the time, I started to utilize images of people much more graphically, reducing it to strictly just a black and a white, and in some ways actually painting away areas of the image that I didn't want to show through, so that I was more interested in the tensions and dynamics of what was going on in the frame, or even in this case, actually combining two different images together to create a drama in that frame. So that this work was actually quite important and did take up a fair amount of my efforts in the I guess the late 60s time, where the graphic image or the very bold imagery and visual elements that I was able to combine were intended to create a drama. In this image I also tried to combine not only the drama, but I reversed the image, and this image kind of combined both the political and the interest in visual elements, you know, that to a degree symbolized what was occurring in the time, and I chose to keep it negative. There's the image in the center is off a television screen of President Johnson, and then people actually from demonstrations that I had photographed, and I can't really remember which demonstration and when, but they were all combined together. So in a sense I started to, in that period, taking liberties with combining images together. And that actually is a motif that has continued to this day, although not so much with images of people at this point. So a lot of exploration of manipulating the image and recombining images together. This is certainly another interest that I had that continued to grow, and as I mentioned, continues to this day. This image was actually photographed at a wedding, ironically in the gardens of the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York, but was later kind of reprocessed in the darkroom utilizing some specialized contour film, and in addition painting out with a material called opaque to obscure areas so that only the areas that I wanted to show through would be apparent.